So yeah, my name's Dominic Taylor. I specialize in recruiting for Golang engineers across the US. Now here at Amicus as a business, we focus on 6 key areas, Golang obviously being one of them, Python, JavaScript, machine learning, Rust, cloud/DevOps, and also AI. Yeah, and the way in which we kind of differ to your typical recruitment agencies is we really pride ourselves on being embedded within communities. So one way in which we do that is these webinars. We also host roundtables, podcasts, and also meetups for those within the community. What we really try to do is help engineers like James and yourself in finding new opportunities and also supporting businesses across the US, UK, and Europe as well in finding really talented Golang engineers. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I know you're not here for me. You're here to listen to Arizona's very own James Jeffrey to find out more about what he's going to be talking about today. James has over 8 years of Golang engineering experience, has worked for the likes of Oracle and Acronis as well. So yeah, really excited to learn more about leveled logging, James. So yeah, without further ado, if you want to take over and introduce yourself and yeah, take over with the webinar.
All right, can everyone hear me? Or can you hear me at least?
Yeah, I can. Loud and clear.
Okay. Oh, there it is. I went full screen and then I couldn't see the thing to share the screen. All right, can you guys see a black screen?
Yeah.
All right. Now you can see a slideshow.
Perfect.
All right. Do you see this Zoom thing at the top or no?
I can see it slightly, but that's okay.
Okay. So, too many logs, an exploration of leveled logging, presented by me, James Jeffrey, Gopher, and a life learner. My GitHub is hibubu2 for anyone who's interested. All right. Why logging? Logging is something that's extremely important. We do it every day. It's critical to how we debug all of the infrastructure, basically, right? If it's not logging, it's metrics somewhere. You have to collect data points about what your system's doing, when your system's performing, while it's running. And most of us just throw logs as much as we can everywhere, and then we put it into Elasticsearch, and then we run a trace on a request ID when we think something happened. And what that really does is mean we store a lot of logs that we don't want to store. And you have to grep through logs. You have to wait on an index of millions of logs to search through a Grafana database with, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of metrics data points that you're then summarizing. Like, it's always a hassle. And the tooling that you end up always using is running something locally, adding more log statements, and then like removing those log statements, and you limit yourself. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it, and that's why it's something that I've always been passionate about, because it happens in every program. So one of the problems that I like to try to solve with logging is never having the right logs. You know, it's like, oh, if we had logged here, we would have had this. If we had logged there, we would have had that. And so that's one of the common problems that happen. You know, you think you would have had the right data, but you didn't. Maybe you thought you had the entire data for all of your user cases for when a new user signs up, but there's some ancillary service that you do something with that wasn't caught somewhere, and you didn't think about it, and it's affecting some other service. I mean, we've all had very complicated bugs that you trace through at least 7 hops, and a junior would normally stop at the first 2 hops because they don't know where to go on the 3rd hop, because, oh, this instance of Jaeger went down, so the distributed tracing with the request ID disappeared. And then, so yeah, never having the right logs. Oh, I guess I talked about tracking use cases easily. All right. And then seeing what code paths cross. So in logs, half the time, you know, you're grepping for something specific because you're thinking of it. And you don't think about it when you create the log statements. You think about it when a new thing is happening in production with some weird thing and you have to retroactively go back. So seeing where your code paths cross and what's going on is always hard. That's why we kind of came up with Open Jaeger and distributed tracing, but those always take time to get set up, require some server somewhere running. It's always an afterthought, and it's always slapped around. Whereas logging is generally the first thing you set up because it's how you debug everything when you go, unless you're using a debugger, but who realistically actually uses a debugger for the majority of their debugging? Not very many people, at least not in my experience. And then the last and one of the most critical things is storing too many logs, right? Because we know that once we store things, most of the time we don't want to get rid of things because once it's stored, it's considered valuable somewhere. We might need it for something. So if you can avoid storing something and say, well, we never needed to store that in the first place, then it's great. And it's easy to do that by just saying, oh, everything at the error level is what we do, but then that's too little. And then we say, oh, well, everything in info, then that's not enough as well, because everyone's like, well, we don't want to flood the logs. Then you're like, well, we can't do debug because that'll flood the logs. And so you don't know because there's only 4 different ways you can do it. And so you either just store a ton and then have Elasticsearch, or you don't store enough and then you have to come back and hope that that you can figure out what happened retroactively. So what is leveled logging? Leveled logging is the idea that everything happens at some sort of level or related to some sort of thing. So that you can, at code, when you're running it, you consciously think when you add in log statements, okay, what is this related to? You know, is this related to authentication? Is it related to, you know, the use case of adding in a new user? And yeah, sometimes you think, well, it's obvious because it's inside of a function with this trace and stuff, but when you're looking at the logs, you're not looking at where the code is. And having to go back and retrace them, you know, with the logs and correlate each line, that takes a long time. And yeah, you could just have line numbers, but then you're still tracing here and there and reading through it. And it's just not always there. So leveled logging is the idea that every log message has some integer, some number represented with the level, and you can manipulate that level for your logging. How does this solve the problems above? You can, with that, you can dynamically make log statement changes without needing to redeploy code, because you can just change the log level from some REST API endpoint or from some thing that you come up with. And that makes it so that you can dynamically say, oh, I need more logs about this specific use caseage that someone already thought about because you added that as part of your developer flow. So then you flip this on and then immediately the logs change and you can see what's going on and you can see where something might have happened that didn't happen based on the way your log leveling is implemented. It comes and becomes built-in tooling that you correlate your related logs together because you're thinking about things ahead of time with a little bit more intent. And then when you do it correctly, you can come back retroactively and add in new levels. And in the future, you'll be able to have that specific change noticed instead of wasting it. Because we all know that normally you go in and you add a bunch of logs when you're doing something to debug and figure it out, but then you delete all your logs afterward. This allows you to keep those log statements, but the logs themselves don't get stored unless you're investigating at that level. So you never have to choose between 3 different levels or 4 different levels anymore. You have infinity levels basically because it's a 64-bit integer in my implementation at least. And then, yeah, more choices, providing more flexibility. I think I need to slow down. How long have we been talking? What time is it? When is that? Oh yeah, this has been like 5 minutes. Okay, I'll talk about code. More choices provide more flexibility. And flexibility as a developer is, in my opinion, what makes a developer be able to develop. But you know, the flexibility should be something that you actually want to use. Okay, so back. Uh-oh. It's not what I wanted. Bear with me. I don't present slideshows very often.
Now you're doing well. No issues.
View. Slideshow, there it is. Okay, so I will just talk about some code because the last thing would be after I'm talking about code. So I have a small little implementation of a leveled logger that allows a lot of these different features. So the first thing I made up, nope, not there. First thing that I made up are constants for the first few log levels that everyone uses, right? Because everyone's going to want debug info, warn, error, and fatal because they're used to those levels. They're used to that kind of granularity. And as they start to use this kind of idea, they would expand. It's like you don't go straight into Vim, and expect someone to just use all the Vim features. So you got to have basic features. So that's why I have these hard-coded levels. And then we have a string mapping so that you can see what the levels are as strings. That comes in later. And then we've got an implementation here as a struct that does the actual logging. When you create a logger, you get a logger. And then the thing that a logger has that a normal logger doesn't is the ability to register a log level as an unsigned integer 64-bit here. And then that does the magic to put it into a map and allow it to be used, has to lock the mutex so that the logger itself doesn't do strange things when you change the log. Data races are bad. But I'll talk about that later on improvements because that's kind of a problem as well. When you lock your logger every time you have to do a log statement, it slows things down. And then we've got unregistering levels, which just removes it. And then this right here gives you like another integer that would be your own unique integer or unique bit associated in a 64-bit integer. Because in a 64-bit integer, right, you have 64 bits. So if you want, if you're going to have less than 64 use cases you're tracking, maybe in a service, right, then each use case can have its own level. And this will tell you what that next level should be. So you just run this function with the logger and it says, use this integer next. And that's used within the register next level function that just takes the name, then it calls that, and then it calls register the level. And then you return the 64-bit integer so that the new person can now set that to a constant and use it however they want. And then you can set the level just by passing in a unsigned 64-bit integer. So that's kind of like the majority of what you use for configuring it is setting the level and adding levels. And then you can set a prefix like a standard logger. And then you can turn on whether or not you have debugging going on. And debugging is a special thing here because it's not like, are you printing out debug statements? It's, are you printing the logs out to an HTTP writer that has been subscribed to in an HTTP service so that you can view live logs from a web page without having to make any code changes. And then if you flip a switch, it disappears. So it's something that I found is very useful because you can just inject it into your HTML UI that you have going on and just press a key and the logs go away. So then we've got standard writing lines, implementations. So now let's just kind of go and I'll show my example that I have here. So this is just something that spins up an HTTP service that I'm going to use to be able to hit the UI to just show the example logger inside of HTML basic UI, because there's not much in the UI. It's just a blank one that I made for a demo. But we'll do this. Let me bring this terminal up so you can actually see it. I'm gonna do go run main Oh no, it's examples. Examples one, maybe. Right, because I had the intention of making more examples, but I didn't. Typical me, procrastinating and then not getting as much done as I originally wanted to. Uh-oh. Oh, I moved the window. Okay, it's back. Okay, cool. So now I'll go to Chrome. And I've got it hosted at localhost logs. No. I think it's just localhost. Okay. Let's go back to the code real quick. Pair web. Register. Get logs. So it is /logs. No. Bear with me here. Unless anyone wants me to like talk about this code, I can do this after or before this little demo here. Logs follow, that's what it is. Okay. Oh no, that is the server-side events of the log. So this is the raw stream that gets injected into the HTMX that I was using. So this is closer. Closer. Logs follow. So then maybe it's logs command. Nope. Here's this. It's going into here. HTML templates. Log box. Get logs. So it is /logs. Okay. Hey guys, we're debugging code that I guess for me is legacy. Why is it not loading? Function F12, let's find out. Oh, it is loading. There it is. It was just because it was taking so long. There are the logs. Hey guys, it's right there. Cool. All right, let me go back to the code real quick and change the example a little bit so that it kind of goes faster. This should be yeah, here we go. Here we go. Who loves some randomness? That makes things look better, right? So just go back to that and kill that and recompile that. There we go. And then ta-da, when we go back to Chrome, the system auto connects because it just knows. And we can see if I restart here. But the cool thing is now if we go here and we do set level debug. So now it's only showing statements that were at the debug level, which in this case is related to a random integer that's getting set as the level for this example. Because if we go back here, we can see that we're logging at a specific level this message. So the at level calls right with any level, which actually gets used so that you can create custom logger functions. If you pass in a level, then it will give you a function that when you pass in arguments, it just logs at that level, which I use for being able to implement your own custom loggers based on use cases, and then anywhere you're doing a use case, you just call that global function for the use case. So then you don't even have to think about passing a logger around, because the loggers are more driven based on use cases and leveling and this concept that's global instead of necessarily related to your HTTP request. But you still do HTTP request structured logging so that you can do the best of both worlds. And I think, how much time are we at? Have I killed enough time yet?
Almost at past.
Almost at half past. Okay. Does someone want to ask something, and maybe I can like talk about the code more? We can add more to this for a better example. I guess because I thought this would take me longer. Maybe I'll talk about the rest of the slide real quick and try and juice that out. Oh, okay. Oh, hey, there's the back button. Okay, so improvements. Currently, my live logging, the thing I showed in the web browser, is bottleneck and terribly inefficient because it goes through a single mutex on a log or on a logging instance, which means it ends up only being able to handle 1,000, maybe 2,000 messages a second, which, depending on what you're doing at scale, is fine, and depending on your scale, it's not. Like if you're at Google scale, you need a much better situation there, but it would be 1,000 per individual pod, so maybe it would be fine at scale, because if you're doing 1,000 messages per pod, maybe you're logging too much, and the idea is you turn on the logging when you need it, and you don't when you don't. So then adding different modes and ways to make level matching calculations work. Right now, when we go to the code and we go to the calculations here, we go and we get the cache level. And if our level is 0, there's no bit set, then we just return blank, right? And then if we turn blank, we don't return an error from writing, but we just don't write anything. But when we go down here further into the logic of getting the level, creating the level here, level prefix, create level prefix. Here's where the magic is. So when we create these level prefixes, this is what makes this message down here with the debug and, oh, I'm not going to go up, but it does parsing of the different levels together. So let's go add this right here. We'll comment this out. Control, comma. And L dot register next level. Okay, well, that's not spelled correctly, but that's fine. Now if we run this, it shouldn't print really anything. Oh, didn't save, and then unimport random. Oh, why do I have memory profiling on? Let's turn that off. Right, turn that off. Bear with me. One more recompile. Live demos, people. Oh, I gotta turn off the web server because that's a. No, that was on a Go routine. What's stopping it? Oh, it's stopping because I have a sleep there. There we go. Okay. Right, I have other managing Go routines. All right. Oh, yes, I closed runtime package. All right, and did we get it? Okay, cool. So it prints nothing because this auth level, I logged it auth, but auth level is not set for this level. So if I go here and I do pipe auth, and I make this auth, and obviously because this is Go and I can't just use something before it exists. There we go. And now, if we go ahead and run it, it says hello from auth because the auth level is set. Now, if we register Goggle, instead of just invoking it randomly, now the level is Goggle, default, auth, and 1. And then so now, we run it, it says hello from auth with the auth level here, right? But if I go ahead and I do now, it says auth, and then this one's auth or Goggle. However, if I do both, of those, or together, so this is saying two use cases together. I want that to be some other level because it's commonly being used. We notice that they're just paired together. You rename the use case, right? And then, but you don't want to have to mess with the old stuff because you're used to them being where they're at. Or whatever reason you have to combine for a new level, you can do this easily here. And then give it a name of both auths. And right? Even though I'm spelling that wrong. Now you come down to here, and if I just do both, comma, no value used as value. 921. Oh, right. You provide, when you set your own integer, you provide the integer. So you have to define the integer because it's not returned from register level, because register level, when you pass in the level, isn't choosing the level. I guess I should have made that return the level so you could just do the one-liner like that, but whatever. And because this bit is registered and this bit is registered and they're all ORed together, if I register both, what'll happen is it ends up having its own name instead of this, and it overwrites when these are both set. But if one or the other is set, they still register separately. So this one will say both, and this one will say both, because this ORs the two together. So now if we run this, see how it says both auth, 80 and Goggle. And so it provides interesting things because when you set a new level and register a new level that combines two use cases, you then find out things that you might not have known that overlap because maybe you take a level with a logger and then you OR it with your new level and then you pass it down into functions and use it around, and then eventually you come back and you notice that, you know, there's this stream where they're connected. And yeah, you can do this kind of stuff with structured logging, but this makes it like a core when you think about it. Like you think about how will my logs flow together, and you kind of talk to yourself in the future with use cases, which yeah, functions are that way, but this makes it to where you don't have to spend as much time reading the code to figure out what the problem is, to know where to go into the code without, you know, just having to identify one specific log. So I think that covers that. I could talk about how I implemented this HTTP stuff. How much time do we have? About 20 minutes.
Yeah, still plenty of time.
All right, well, here we go. So the idea here was to have a writer that takes in a writer flusher. So take in something that's a writer flusher and return something that is a writer, and then use that writer for in the logger. Because when we create a new logger, where's the logger log? There we go. When we do a new logger, we pass in a writer. So I was like, I want to make it so that if the logger is going on, I can just go ahead and have the, you know, dynamically inject into the writer, pick up the writer, and it start writing out to a web request, as well as maybe standard out, whatever it was already configured to. So for me, that seemed like a simple HTTP HTML wrapper. So I have it taken a flush writer, which in this case, a flush writer is a comes from IO writer and HTTP flusher. So an HTTP response writer implements both of these, and you use that to be able to do server sent events. Every time I call flush, we send over an event that looks like this, where this right here is the byte slice that was printed out on that log message. So the part that gets printed here when it's running. And so the way this works, if we just go back to this example here, and I uncomment all of this, and then we save. Well, I guess that all doesn't need to be uncommented because that doesn't actually use any of my code. That's the nice thing about it. Okay. So when you do this, after you create your new logger, you register your levels, and then you set your level. And then the last thing, this is completely unrelated, so I'm just gonna put this up here because it's just like benchmarking stuff. The last thing you do, if you want to be able to have the HTTP support for the HTMX logs that I was showing earlier, I call prepare for web logs, which takes in an HTTP handle func. In this case, okay, why did that? Let's see, go back. Right. I pass in HTTP handle func, the function, to prepare for web logs. And that's because inside of here, I call it register, because it's a func that takes a pattern, a handler, and response. So it's to register a route, basically. This way, I didn't have to make a route handler and deal with the route or anything. I could just plug into the basic systems stuff. But if I wanted to, I could make my own custom register function in the future. So that was just like some dependency injection right there. And I chose to use the native dependency, but in the future I can easily change it out. And I wanted to think that as generic. So then what we do, the first thing I do is I make the channel that I'm going to use to determine whether or not things are ready. So that I don't register any of the routes and return from the function until all of the stuff that needs to be set up is set up. And so I create a Go routine here that creates another channel for writers, and then a channel for writers and a channel for writers. And then these three channels do as what they say. The current writer comes in on a channel whenever I want to get the current writer, or the current writer is where you get the current channel from. When you add a writer, you send it on this channel. When you remove a writer, you send it on this channel. And that is where this single kind of threaded approach, it works pretty good for one logger, but it doesn't scale really well if you have too many messages coming on. That's the thing I talked about earlier about only being able to handle about 1,000 messages a second. It's because you're really limited to one core when you're doing this kind of logic right here, because these three have to exist, because it's a single threaded thing. It's a for loop, and then it's selecting on this on these three channels. But the power that gives me is I don't really have to worry about which writer is which, because when you get the writer, you can write to it, and you do that for the one write statement. And then when you're done with the writer, you don't use it anymore. And so if I update the writer, the next person gets the writer. And the way this works is I have a connected writers, which is a slice of IO writers. And the current writer is a multi-writer, which has that slice of writers plus the current writer on the logger, which is the original writer that's passed in. So I'm never overriding the original writer. And then we go through here, and if we get add writer request, we append the writer to the current writer, and then we make a new multi-writer and assign that to the current writer. And then if we get remove a writer, we remove the writer from the connected writers and reset it. So this is just a slice of writers. And then IO multi-writer just takes in a slice of writers as variadic args and returns a writer that if you write to it, it will write to all those writers. So this is writers on writers on writers, but it makes it so that you don't have to think about anything. You just get this magic interface, and it's got a terminal kind of like shell in it where you can change how the logs are working and the shape of them. And yeah, that's how that works. And then we can see where the current writer stuff works by going to where we read from the writer channel, and that's in this get writer function. So we try to get the writer, and if the writer doesn't get really, really quickly, then the default is just to use the current writer. That way, if this is like blocking up or being really slow or something, we don't have to worry about trying to send it. So it means some messages might be dropped under heavy load, but it also means we won't get a lockup of everything because of the fact that it's, trying to wait on getting that writer, because you could cause it to block, but then you're going to make everything synchronous, and, it's just better. Always have a default if you can. And yeah, unless you want it to never do anything but those things, you can do that too. But in this case, I didn't want it to ever block. So, and then if we go to where get writer is called inside of all the FMTs that are used to define the write line functions and the write function and the write f function. And those are all used by all the other functions that log. And so that's kind of how, that's the majority of how this logger works. It's pretty simple, but it kind of enables some uniqueness if you think differently that other things don't have, and that I wasn't happy with just plain structured logging. So and then one thing that I would improve is adding different modes, ways to make level calculations work, because right now, if we go back over to the code, the level calculation right here is, where is it? Where do we get the level? Get the level, get the full level. Level, L dot level. Level prefixes, where does it actually get the level? Oh, right here, create level prefix name message level. This is where the level stuff happens. And so inside of here, we try to get a level name from a map based on the message level. And if it exists, and that level, and whether or not it exists. So if it exists and this Boolean passes right here, and this is saying on a bitwise level if level and message level are not equal to 0. So that's saying if any of the bits that are set in level and any of the bits are set in message level are the same, then go ahead and use this. And then if debug's on, then we format it slightly different. Otherwise, the level prefix gets appended with the level name that was brought out of here. And then if it doesn't exist, we loop through all the levels and we do that same if the level and the level, but then we also level it with the message level. So we check the individual bits that to see if the individual bits are set based off of the levels inside of our giant or our list of levels, which could be, you know, any length. And then we go ahead and do some different formatting here for the level name. Otherwise, we add the level name in. And then if the level name prefixes aren't set, then we set the message level here to blank. So that we know that we're caching here that the message level is blank, or that meaning that level doesn't exist. So we know in the future and we don't have to recalculate it, because caching things is what makes things really fast. And then here we sort the level prefixes that we found, and then we go ahead and format them together with pipes. And then if we have a prefix, we format in the prefix. If the prefix is not a blank string, then we add a period, and then we add that prefix into that same map that we cached up here when it was blank. And then we return the level prefix. And so mind you, all this down there doesn't happen, or this doesn't happen, right, if that message level already exists. And if did I do this wrong? I think I might still be sorting these wait. Yeah. Anyway, so this is what dynamically builds this thing here that would do the double pipe. If I go back to the main here and I unregister both, control, where is it? There. Unregistering both, and go ahead and I rerun this. Now it says auth and goggle, and that's because it's doing that bitwise logic, and then it's saying those are the bits that are set. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that works. I'm not sure if that. And then another thing would be alarms, because I prefer to not have to use like other people's alarming stuff. And if it's just, you know, when it can just be a simple webhook to like Slack that's based on something going really bad, you know, because then I'm controlling it. And then the ability to control logs from one place efficiently. And that was like this idea of like all the loggers that get created, I should have them somewhere knowing they exist. And if someone's looking for something on some set of bits and they just change the level on their logger, maybe I can get all the logs with the other loggers across maybe even different services automatically to be able to know that those are related together. But that's something that, you know, is just like, it's a pipe dream. Anyways, I think that killed, yeah, there's 8 minutes left. Any questions? Oh, and then the other thing is, at the time that I did all this, I didn't know about the new slog interface that Go has, which has the ability to call a level function and do a handler function. So I think I'm going to rewrite it to that, and I'll be able to use the native Go package for most of this. It would just be using one of their interfaces to plug into their logging ecosystem. So something to think about and ponder on. Any questions? That's the end.
Nice. That was really good, James. Yeah, it's really fascinating from my perspective. Obviously, I'm used to speaking to engineers like yourself on a daily basis, but kind of seeing what you do up and close, yeah, it's my first time. So really, really interesting to see what you guys really get up to. There's no questions that have been asked as of yet. If anyone does have any, feel free to drop them in the chat. But yeah, it's usually a good sign. Obviously, quite clear as to what you were really displaying and presenting there. Just from my own perspective, though, yeah, just in terms of learning resources, are there any kind of tips and tricks for the engineers who are tuned in, where they can find more information? Any of the resources that you've used to kind of upskill in the Golang space?
Yeah, so I can drop a link right here. It is oh no, not Golang, they changed it. So that link, I believe, will go straight to the tutorial. Yep, that's the official Go tutorial thing. And that will walk you through all of what the language has to provide in terms of the feature set.
Yeah.
Not all the packages, but all of the core like standard library you don't have to call, or the core standard like syntax and stuff. No libraries or really anything, but like how you add, how you subtract, how you do if statements, when while loops, for loops, select statements, switch statements, maps and arrays and slices and byte slices and all the data types and how does concurrency work and all of that. That's in this tour. And then there's another one, Go Lang I do. This other one is a good resource as well, Go by Example. It has how to do all of the different things that it talks about on that one little thing there. If you look at it, it's got a list of links, and those are all to the same site, and they all have the same format of having a example that you can run in the browser, and comments on the side explaining what it's doing and why it's doing it, how it's doing it.
Awesome.
So
Brilliant. I've taken note as well. So when it is posted, we'll leave those resources in the comments and on YouTube as well, just in the bio for anyone to take more of a deep dive as well. In terms of yourself, James, where can people find you? I know you put your GitHub up at the beginning, and obviously I've
yeah.
got you on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm on LinkedIn and then I'm on the GitHub with Hibubu2. And the really easy one is my email, which is wizardofmath@gmail.com. So I'll drop that real quick.
We've just got a message from Leon. He's struggling to find the links.
Oh, I did it in the webinar chat, not in the Q&A.
Okay.
It's to the hosts and the panelists. Maybe Leon should. Did you get all the links?
Yeah, I can see them myself. Leon, I think we've got you on our database. So what I'll do after this, yeah, I'll drop you a message and then I'll send you the links separately as well, just to make sure that you've got them.
Did anyone notice that I was using my did anyone have a comment on like how my screen looked, or did no one really pay attention to that, I wonder?
It looks fine on my side. Why? What did you notice?
Well, it's not anything that I noticed. I use Linux with i3, which is a tiling window manager, so I barely use my mouse most of the time.
Oh, nice.
Like, I don't know, but I was wondering if anyone picked up on that or not, because like there's no Windows stuff. I didn't write, I don't open up menus to open up programs and stuff like that.
Cool.
But
Yeah, no one's picked up on it, but yeah, very
yeah,
impressive.
well, it's not trying to be impressive, just trying to be quicker. I recently switched to it about 6 months ago, and it's made me 30 to 40% more efficient, which is nice because I can spend less time figuring out what I'm doing with the computer and more time just doing it.
Yeah. What made you make that switch?
There's a YouTuber that I watch who's also a engineer at Netflix of 10 years,
Nice.
and he named the Primogen, and he uses a window manager similarly, and so I decided to give it a try, and I really liked it. The less you take your hands off the keyboard, the easier it is to get your code out of you. So That's why Vim exists. That's why NeoVim exists. You know, that's why there's extensions in VS Code to do Vim motions, because people want to not have to take their hands off the fucking keyboard.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it all blows my mind, to be honest. I'm just getting used to using a wireless mouse, so yeah, cool. Brilliant.
I do
Any
not use a wireless mouse. I prefer
no,
wired.
no, I'm the complete opposite, to be honest. I like a clean look on my desk, so no wires.
Well, my desk is not clean, but I do have a split keyboard. So this is half of my keyboard right here.
Oh, very fancy.
And it's one of those ones that's concave and ortholinear. So the keys are all in columns instead of staggered columns. And it prevents ulnar deviation and RSI. But it's like $500, so I don't know if everyone needs it.
Yeah, I'd definitely be having words with my director afterwards.
Well, I pay for it myself, so
Nice.
not a work thing. But they last for years, and you take it from job to job. And when you code all day for fun and for work, it helps.
Yeah, yeah, I can certainly imagine. Brilliant. So yeah, no further questions from the guests. Any last words at all, James?
Just again, apologies for being 7 minutes late. I can't believe that happened. It's stupid. What happened is on my window manager, down in the bottom right hand corner, there's a status bar and it updates. It's supposed to update every 5 seconds to show the time. And apparently it stopped updating. So the process for it had crashed and I didn't get a notification of it. And then when I got a call from you, I was like, wait a second, it's past the time. And then I see my thing and the freaking time is frozen. I like look at it for like 20 seconds. It's like it's frozen. It crashed. One pin down. So,
Gosh, no, don't worry about
like
it.
frozen in time, man. Like imagine you're coding. Like the lights all go down. It's like 1 a.m. and then it freezes there, and you don't know until 6 a.m. when the sun comes up.
Yeah.
You're like, where did those 5 hours? It says it's 1 a.m. It said it was 1 a.m. all night. Anyways, so
yeah, brilliant.
it was great presenting, though. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, it was awesome. Awesome. My first time hosting as well. So yeah, we're both debutants here as well. So I really enjoyed it, James. One last question from myself. Obviously, you've been using Golang now for over 8 years. Some of the people, the audience will have much less experience. Any tips for people just kind of starting out using the language?
Yeah, come up with something cool that you want to write that no one else has really written. Write it, and then that'll help you get jobs.
Nice.
Like some people are like, oh, I'll go build a to-do list. No, don't do a to-do list. Do something that's something like related. Everyone has hobbies. Do something related to a hobby that you have somewhat. Like if you like cooking, build a recipe app. Make it your own flair. If you like, biking, build some sort of like app that finds all the different bike stuff and congregates it and does something. Build some sort of thing with whatever tool set you want that shows a competency in the ability to design a system through and through, not just for endpoints, but some sort of complex use case where one person does something, and as a result of that one person, other people have to know that that thing was done, and they can see that thing, and then they can do something as a result of that thing to another thing, thus creating a complex dependency graph that can be infinitely sized, but your project doesn't have to be good enough to be infinitely scalable. Just the concept of what it's doing has to have the concept of infinite complexity because it hits so many things, and so like maybe you're just making a Pokedex. That right there has a lot of different problems. If you say, oh, it's a Pokedex, but I can share my Pokedex with other people, right? So, or maybe the Pokedexes interact with each other when we get close via Bluetooth if you have the thing installed, kind of like with Pokemon
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's really helpful for the community. Obviously, it's been a difficult market this year, across tech as a whole, and people who are more entry and junior level who may have the bug for Golang, like yourself, trying to get into the space. Yeah, like you say, really working on personal projects that are fully scalable and fully workable. Yeah, it's definitely going to help them land opportunities.
Well,
Uh,
like I said, not scalable,
oh,
not
sorry.
scalable.
Work.
Because if you try to make something scalable with no users, you're just wasting your time. You have
Yeah,
to build something that you want to use that has complexity to it that someone else might want to use.
yeah,
Because if someone else wants to use it, then that means if your idea works, then the scalability is what you think about. And
yeah,
scalability isn't something you think about until you're at my level of a senior engineer. Before you're a senior engineer, all you think about is I've got a feature, maybe I've got 3 features and I need to work those together. Once you get to the level where you're thinking about all the features and scaling and all of that, you move up to senior very quick. If
yeah,
you're just trying to do well as a junior and break into as a normal level, you need to be able to figure out how to implement features and get good at implementing features, because if you can't code well and you don't understand the system at the bottom, you're never going to be able to do the top. It's like being really good at addition and subtraction, multiplication and division before touching algebra. Because if you're not good at all that stuff before touching algebra, algebra is a hell of a lot harder.
yeah.
Unless you use Wolfram Alpha, but then you're cheating, you know. And in software, you can always use Google to help you out while you're working. So it's
Chat
kind of like
GPT.
cheating. But the thing is, if you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you know, and you don't know enough to know what to look for, then your questions aren't even good enough to be able to find the answer. And that's why, ChatGPT isn't going to get rid of humans coding yet,
Yeah,
because people it's that whole thing where you ask the product manager talks to the customer, and the customer says I want one thing, and then you have another thing, and eventually the guy was told that he was going to get a roller coaster that was amazing and great, and super quality, and then he was billed like he got 5 roller coasters, but he actually ended up getting a half built freaking bumper car arena.
yeah,
Like, and it's because of all the miscommunications with all the humans. And as long as there's humans, AI isn't going to get rid of our jobs, which is why so many people think that AI is going to kill us all. But I don't think that's what's going to happen.
definitely not. I
We
hope
got
not
smart
anyway.
people. We got
Exactly.
smart people.
Definitely, definitely. It's all about relationships as well. They can't replace relationships and human interaction. So, yeah, fingers crossed anyway. Well, yeah, it's been a
Well,
pleasure. Sorry.
I was gonna say, well, I don't know if you've seen Dolly and the
Yeah,
stuff they can generate.
that is
In a
true.
couple years, you might be able to generate something like this. Just, you know, type someone in, but people would be able to detect it because you wouldn't have like the micro things of like, like right now I'm stretching my neck. Like ChatGPT isn't gonna know that you should randomly stretch your neck.
Yeah,
Oh
it
yeah, my
literally
neck
knows.
hurts. Stretch, stretch, stretch. No, ChatGPT doesn't get a sore neck. Upright, to do, to do. Their
Yeah,
body language is just little ticks. Getting drinks of water, like
exactly, exactly. Well, I hope the future's not bleak and AI doesn't take over anyway. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, James. Really enjoyed the conversation. As I said before, really fascinated to see code up live and in person. So yeah, really appreciate that. Hopefully we can get you on for more episodes going forwards as well. If
yeah.
you Yeah, awesome. If you were tuned in, have any questions, feel free to contact James via his email address, also his GitHub and LinkedIn. We'll also, as I said previously, we'll have all the resources that we discussed on our YouTube and also LinkedIn posts as well. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed hosting with you guys on my first segment here, and hopefully this is the first of many. But yeah, happy holidays, and I hope to connect with everyone in this chat throughout the coming weeks. Any last words from yourself, James?
No, I mean, if anyone wants to contact to learn more about Go or talk about code or anything, I don't have a Twitch stream up yet. I did at one point for like a week back in college. I never really stuck with it. But if someone wants to, I'm happy to hop on Discord and
Awesome,
have a thing. So,
awesome, brilliant.
yeah.
Yeah, always here to add value to the community. So yeah, pleasure hosting. And yeah, this is the first of many. Happy holidays, guys. And yeah, hopefully speak to you guys soon. Take care.